This is Critical Nonsense, our high lowbrow show about culture, science, and tech. This week, Joey asks me about predicting the future. Woo!
But this is what Joey sounds like. And this is what an executive producer and Paxton Holden, Jess Vander, sounds like.
Hi, this is Jess.
You're Paxton, you're Holden.
Actually realizing I know none of those words.
I saw a funny thing the other day about someone being like, the Counting Crows are an incredible band, and if their lead singer didn't look like this with a poster, with like an image of what Adam Duritz looks like, they would probably be received in a very different manner than they are. And I was like, yeah, no, I think I agree with this wholeheartedly. It's a fascinating example of like just someone who doesn't present in a manner that like allows you to maybe fully appreciate what their art or creation is.
Am I misremembering that line is... I thought that was from Sum 41's Semi-Charmed Kind of Life.
Third Eye Blind.
Third Eye Blind?
That was Third Eye Blind, but like those
wait.
that, like contemporaneous artists. Counting Crows started a little bit before Third Eye Blind, but it just made me it like popped me into that zone. But Adam Duritz is like a white Jewish dude with like crazy dreadlocks, like, but has also dated at that time dated like some of the most beautiful famous women in the world. Wow. Courtney Cox and Jennifer Aniston at the peaks of their powers, like, just, but also everyone's just like, but why?
He's like, look, he's a very charismatic man.
Yeah.
We're just, okay.
Yep, fair enough.
Yeah, there you
go. Like, did Monica Potter wrote a song about Monica Potter?
Wow.
Yeah. Again, I digress.
Yeah.
Jessica, I have a question for you.
Sure.
I saw something recently about an exposition on how broken political polling is. It's a political year, and you're in election year in the United States, presidential election year, one of the major ones. And the polls are not, the math isn't mathing, as someone might say, where based on historical models, like states that are doing X, Y, and Z, similar types of states would be doing different things. And they're just showing like incredible conflicts. Like, if, one person is leading this state, then predictably this other state would look similar and the numbers look nothing alike. And one of the things that this person was speaking about, and I'll find the thing and we'll put it in the show notes, was historically all of the political polling has been based on phone polling, right? It was a cheap method of polling, or relatively cheap method of polling. You get 1,000 people to answer a phone call in a certain area, whatever. You make some sort of statistical model based on that. 36% of people would typically like answer the phone and be like, yes, I'm going to vote for this person, or I don't like this issue. Now the response rate is down to 6%.
Wow.
Which is, a lower number.
Lower than 30 some
It is
odd.
Is it the square root? Yes, it is the square root. And in conjunction with that, I'm pulling up where it came from. There was an article that came out about how people are also afraid of phones. It was either like the Times or the Atlantic about phone phobia. I'm seeing something in Forbes, but this was not the piece. It was like a large article recently about how like people are like freaked out, like you can't call them. Mm-hmm. So obviously this like whole polling method of our ability to understand our political system at any given moment is effectively like fully broken, right? The people who answer their phones tend to be older people. They're based on landlines. Like young people don't even have landlines. And it made me think about this idea of like, we have gotten increasingly heavily oriented on data and predicting the future, but the methods with which and like institutions and infrastructure to be able to do that over the past, let's call it even 5 years, has like dramatically begun to fall apart. And so my question for you is, how do we predict the future?
Can there possibly be a less insanely massive question?
Do you need another example? I could give you another example.
Unrelated to polling?
I think it's like an example of a similar method where it's like a increased orientation towards data giving us validity for understanding the world around us.
And yet it is shockingly ineffective.
Yeah, advertising targeting as an example, right? Or even broadly advertising under a traditional like version, right? Like broadcast advertising. People are not engaging with cable networks in the same way or their televisions in the same way. Same with like digital predictive models, like Apple included a toggle in its system that says like, don't track me. And all of a sudden now targeted advertising methods don't work any longer, right? And the reason to be able to predict like, who is the customer that would be interested in buying my product and where can I find them? It was like, cool, we built up this system that said like, yes, here you go, independent of like commentary on the benefits of those methods. But like that system was effectively turned off with a software update, like just gone.
Yeah, it makes me think of like, it's like a kind of evolution where we're like, we are adapting to our environments, and so things that worked no longer work. It's like different immunities can be built up and resistances developed. Like I even think about like to the phone polling example, made me realize like, oh, our solution from like a email standpoint is like people will have a personal email and then they'll have a spam email, and that email address is the one they'll sign up everything with. Mm-hmm. It's like I don't have to think as hard about that email address, but my personal one, maybe I try to be more cautious about who I share that with, or it's more for personal correspondence. And that sort of compartmentalization technique. Phones do not have that same ability, and with the amount of robocallers and spammers and whatever, it's easier to block all of that out. And then suddenly when a meaningful call comes through, it's very difficult to discern those things. And here we have adapted to the changing environment of a deluge of undesired calls. And because you can't determine which actually you might be interested in, you ignore them all. That's assuming that that's the core issue. I guess there's also the other potential issue of like people just being scared of the phone.
Yeah.
In a different way.
Yeah.
Than the way in which my brother and I were scared to call the library when we were growing up. I think it's slightly different. It's like, we have so many other forms of communication now that we can rely on that allow you to think before you respond.
Yeah.
So a phone call is terrifying when you have the much better option that you can edit instead. Yeah. But I back to the primary question, which is like it almost reminds me of the conversation that we had recently about changing the goalposts and then the way we measure, right? Mm-hmm. It's like it's probably that the objective is the same, but the mechanism is faulty now, right?
Yeah. I mean, I think there in this example, I guess if we like focus on the polling one, right? It's not to say that there aren't methods in which we could, develop that maybe are more cost intensive that could accomplish what we historically had been able to accomplish, but they are more cost intensive and requires like an entirely new system. And instead what we're seeing is sort of that like, I think it's like credited to Einstein, but it's not actually Einstein of like, insanity is doing the same thing over and over and expecting different results. Like the past like 2 election cycles, people were like, polling's not working. Clearly, like, look at these situations, look what happened. But then we're like coming out and it's like the new Siena poll says that this is happening, and everyone's like, this doesn't make any sense. And so like the idea of being like, either you sort of like reinvent new polling methods that are more cost intensive and you don't get the same information cycle, or you feed the journalistic loop where like new polling comes out every 2 weeks from these like set known entities, and you just publish a piece about like new polling numbers say that the sky is falling. I that part of it is difficult. I mean, I think like the evolutionary analogy is interesting from the perspective of like the environment has new conditions and is like, are you going to survive or not? But like in these like current conditions, it's sort of, it seems like everyone's going to die in terms of like the polling companies. It doesn't seem like anyone's like the YouGov poll is not like doing any better than the Siena College or the, you know, whatever else.
You've been watching too much Three Body Problem.
Yeah, that's what it is.
It's a chaotic era.
Yeah, I mean, I've been thinking about the chaotic era in so many different ways. So yes. Probably the answer is yes.
Probably that. How do we get better at predicting? What's funny, because even the examples that you're giving about polling and ad targeting, like the things that even historically have been measured are less about the future than just like understanding more clearly what people want right now. And that can, having a accurate picture of that can tell the future, and it is also very difficult to measure that.
Yeah, I mean, like, not to say that polls obviously didn't exist in some, you know, like people would do like person on the street polls like whenever. And so there is sort of, I think, this comfort in the expectation that if you have a question, you can validate it before taking an action. And so like risk aversion, you know, like before, like the ability to do massive digital research or to like target people, like companies took risks based on some like other predictive model, whether that was someone's intuition or expertise or creativity or whatever. And, you know, things operated for better or worse. But like the expectation that you could go and do a thing that will give you some predictive measure of the future has become so commonplace, and for those things to suddenly like be gone like forces people into these situations of like, I don't know what anything means, right? And like in our current chaotic era, as you described it, and I've, you know, also recently described it, it's like starting in 2020 we entered into a chaotic era, and there are like people now who are like, survive till 25, like everything will be normal in 2025. It's like, will it? Like we could be in a stable era that is an entirely different stable era than anything we've been in prior.
It's interesting to think about it as something that would only be, that we can only recognize as problematic because it feels like there is some amount of loss of like, at one point we had figured out a way to do this that seemed to work for a time.
Yeah.
And we had made some progress and made some choices. And it's surprising that is not, like, to lose that is weird. Like, usually we just move forward when it comes to technology and our advances as a society. Funny if certain things just break after a time.
Yeah. I mean, I told you recently, like, I don't think it was on one of the episodes, but I had heard someone make a case recently. They were like, someone's like, what's the hot take that like everyone does the Rapunzel meme or whatever with like all the swords pointed at you? And the person was like, I think targeted advertising is a public good. And everyone's like, qua? Like, come again? But their point was like, if a business can find the appropriate business and they're spending less to find that person. And also they are delivering you a thing that you're actually
That
like,
you want.
I
Right.
want and need that
Right.
thing. Like spending is down. You have the things in your life that you need. And otherwise we just get an increasingly noisy environment where people are spending to like yell at you all the time instead of talk to you at the right time. And I was like, I was not entering into this with like any belief whatsoever, but like I was like actually like, could you be right? Like it definitely like opened my mind to be like, maybe they're not wrong. And it wasn't like someone who was a digital advertiser, like they had no vested interest in this. And I was like, fair enough.
This belief system powers a behemoth like Amazon. That is the pinnacle of customer service, to provide such specific, tailored offerings to you. Also, I feel like I wish I had a thing that is thoughtful to say about this question. It is an interesting one, and I also don't know if I have contributed anything to it.
There's like a different version of this right now that is potentially like in some ways opposite, in some ways the same, where, you know, people like Ray Dalio's like Bridgewater Associates is like famous for like hyper critiquing everyone in the, you know, it's like we get done this recording session and I'm like, actually today you gave a 4 instead of a 5 and like you should know, or you're like, Joey, that was a 2, like that was you didn't show up. But then we would go into another meeting and then at the end of that like rate each other on our performance in that meeting.
Whoa.
And like the joke was that the thing about Bridgewater is that the algorithm is probably doing everything because people are so busy rating each other that they're not interfering with it, right? Like, which sort of like feeds into this like predictive mindset, and that like algo trading is more effective than people or something like that. Like, I don't know. I mean, we've talked about in the past, like, you know, like seismic shifts or things like that, right? Like sort of like significant changes, probably when we were like in the beginning of this moment. And I think now we are like fully in this moment. And some of these like anxieties and vibe session or things like that people are talking about, I think like in large part just has to do with the fact that it's like ambiguity stacked on ambiguity stacked on ambiguity. It's like, well, I can't target someone and I can't have a accurate view of like how the election's going to go and what do people actually think of this policy, and like, is inflation going down or up? Like, is the consumer price index like actually accurate? Because how are they pulling that? And polling is broken. And are they, you know, are they like trying to call people? You know, it is just like this like stacked like turtles all the way down of ambiguity and unpredictability.
Wow. How do we leave this in a place that isn't terrifying?
You probably don't need to know the future because it's coming no matter what. So just be here now. I guess. I don't know, you know.
Trust your heart, let fate decide?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, ride with a blindfold on? I don't know.
Wow. Dear listeners, please let us know if the phrase ride with a blindfold on is reassuring to you in any capacity. Is that helpful?
Did you see the movie Birdcage with, or whatever with Sandra Bullock? Did you say, I want to be her? Well, have we got the universe for you? Is there a wrap up on this, or are we just going to say, stop trying to predict the future, at least while we're in a chaotic era?
Or if you want to crack this new code,
probably a lot of money in it for you.
Actually accurate. You looking for a treasure hunt? Go forth. Dig.
Solve ambiguity. Critical Nonsense is a Sylvain production.
Brought to you by I know what it is.
As always, we'd like to thank executive producer and Black Box, Jess Vander.
You're welcome. We'd also like to thank sound engineer and never afraid of phones, Alex Contel.
We'd like to thank programming coordinator and one of those question mark boxes in Mario, Les Jacobs.
Thanks to our production crew and highly evolved beings, Sarah Gilbert and Nora Mestrich.
And as always, thanks, Elaine.
Thanks.
Special thanks to Mystery Flavor Airheads. That was sitting right there for you.
Oh, boy. Is it grape or is it all the dregs of all little snippets of other Airheads?
It's that.
Okay.
It changes flavors. It's one of them
It's
that
just
hasn't
whatever
been
is the
dyed.
extra one. It's like, oh, we have a little bit of this. We need more mystery in our lives. And the secret to mystery is the dregs of other things we know. Right?
I think
That's loot boxes. That's all. That's like all it is just the extra stuff. And if you label it mystery,
based on your reaction to this conversation, mystery is not what you need in your life right now. Well, we did it.
okay, cool. Thanks.
Thanks. Love you. Mean it. Bye.